wanted to take the opportunity to thank everybody for joining me today. I know last week there was a lot of information there. Now, the purpose of this four-part series is to guide you, as well as to give you best practices in the industry. A lot of employers do not know the rules when it comes to putting in benefit programs. Some employers say, I only want to offer single coverage to my staff, not knowing that there are, anti-selection rules, or there's rules and regulations. There's best practices, and there's also risk and liability. If a benefit plan isn't implemented properly, there's a risk to all of our stakeholders. So we talked about stakeholders last week. We're going to continue to talk about those stakeholders throughout the next 2 weeks, including today. But for the purposes, the stakeholders, that there's five. There's you, the advisor. There's IDC WIN as the MGA. There's the carrier that we happen to be putting the program with. There's the employer from a risk and liability perspective. There's the employee. They are the number one stakeholder in all, because you're going to want to put in a benefit plan that represents the needs of the employees, to provide client engagement, to make sure that the plan is doing what it needs to do for those employees, and to make sure that we've put in the right program for the right client to meet those objectives. And so when we talk about stakeholders, we're talking about those five. But there are rules and regulations that are really important. We're going to we talked about some of them last week. In the webinar I did before, the best practices in the industry, we learned a little bit there. But today especially, we're going to get right down into the crux of some of the industry-specific information that you need to know, as well as best practices in the industry, and making sure you're covering off your own credibility, your own liability, as well as the employer's credibility and their liability. So with that, I'm going to get right in. Let me just do that. So the request to quote process and group underwriting. There's always, whenever we do one of these webinars, there's always learning objectives. In this webinar, there's three. Understand the process to request a quote for the client. Understand why specific information is required by underwriters. Understand some best practices in gathering information from clients and prospects. So if you've worked with our team before, you know that when we get a request to quote, we often come back to you with questions that we might have after we've evaluated it. There might be missing information that we need, rates and claims projections and information might not be aligned. We might require DIN listings, DIN report. We're going to get all into that. But it's not because we want to be difficult. It's not because we're trying to push back. It's because we're trying to ensure that the insurance carriers are getting a true, accurate, clean request to quote, especially if one of your prospects currently has benefits put in place. There are specific questions that a virgin group we require, a group that's never had coverage before, and other questions that a group who currently has coverage needs. And we want to make sure that it's accurate, that it's clean, that the insurance companies are not coming back and forth with questions, because that can delay many aspects of the plan. It could delay the quotes that we get. That will put a delay in you presenting it, and then a delay in implementation. If they currently have coverage, it'll be a delay in canceling one policy and putting in another. So we want to make sure that we're getting the information and that you understand why we're asking. So that's the key part. As you can see on this slide, there's six kind of aspects or six types of processes in order to get you a quote. Okay, so let's go through them. There's you, the advisor, contacts us to request the quote. Amazing. We've had a conversation. You've told us what business model that you want to use. We've had a kind of a a discussion about the nature of industry, maybe some ideas of what type of benefit plan that we're going to put in place. So that's step one. The second step is review the information provided by the advisor. We want to put in a couple of days in there. You may need to go back to your client and get some of that information. But we want to make sure that we're doing one email with everything that's missing so that you can go back and get the requested information if necessary. From there, we prepare and submit the request or quote to the underwriters. And we do that in a certain amount of days. It doesn't take that long to populate if we have all the information. And when we mean underwriters, we say underwriters because at IDC Win, we work with a slew of carriers. So we might be working with a TPA, we might be working with an insurance carrier, we might be doing a standalone product, maybe it's simplified underwriting. So we don't want to always call them carriers, we call them underwriters depending on the product that we're showcasing. Then we receive the quotes and we compile responses from those underwriters in a certain amount of days. We'll communicate with that to you. And then once either Candy and I have taken some time to review it, make sure that there aren't any errors, make sure that we've showcased it properly, then we'll send it to you for your review. Now, depending on the business model that you're choosing to work with IDC in, that might be us setting up a meeting with you to present. You might be doing it on your own, or it might just be one of our team presenting that. So you might be asking, well, that seems complicated. That seems a lot. Why does this process or why does the RTQ even matter? Well, it matters because it's the key to getting accurate and reliable group benefits quotes. We can't just send, a little bit of material and hope for the best. There are going to be questions that the insurance carriers want in order to provide a quote, especially depending on the nature of industry. So for instance, let's say you're working with a trucking company. Trucking companies have a lot of questions that insurance underwriters come back to us with. Are they owner operators? Are we doing LTD? Are they 100% employees? Are they contract employees? Does this company have seasonal employees? We need to know that in order to paint a picture. Remember at last session, I told you that everything I do revolves around watching television. So in our Netflix series, again, we do not want to come in at season 3, episode 2 of our story. We want to make sure that we've got all the information at the beginning in order to properly send this quote out to market. So we want to know, are we doing a class structure? Are there executives and all other employees? What's the idea about the plan? Again, seasonal employees, contract employees. Do we need to, create our plan for that type of thing? That's why we ask for it. So the smoother the process, the fewer caveats and updates as you move through the sale. Number 2, it also allows IDC Win and underwriters to help you present value-added designs and service options to your client. So what does that mean? It means that when you did your discovery, like we talked about last week, you probably highlighted some important aspects of the organization that were really important. Maybe it was make sure to put in a quote for a mental health strategy. Maybe it was this group is interested in a group retirement plan. So we need to make sure that we're checking the box and listening to what the client asked for. It might be that we need to tier this between classes. So the more information that we can get, the more our Netflix series starts to take shape, the better it is for you when you go and present it, because we've checked off all of the questions and we made sure that we were listening to everything you wrote down when you did your discovery, which we talked about last week. I am going to stop right for 1 second. I'm going to look at a question that came through. Okay, so When we're talking about business models that we have with IDC, that we could talk about in a one-on-one discussion. So I encourage you to reach out to me. We work with advisors in 3 different business models, depending on how much engagement you want from our team. But I'd love to have that conversation. At the end, I'll put in my email address in the chat if you don't already have it, and you can reach out to me and we can have that conversation. So the elements of a proper RTQ. So last week, when we were talking about the discovery, this was an example of the document that we use, but you may have your own, and happy to do that. Sometimes a discovery could just be a simple email that you have sent to us with highlighting some of the conversation that you may have had with your prospect, and that's good enough as well. But we do have templates. So there's 7 elements of what we want to know when we're working with a group, whether it's the advisor or the client directly, and information that is not only important to you, but to me or our team and to the underwriters. So there's 7 aspects of it. Number 1, the company information, name of company, nature of business, how long they've been in business for. So that. Then there's the underwriting information, which we're going to get to. So that's, questions that we might have if it's a group who currently has coverage. If it's a virgin group, that those are different questions that we ask. Administration requirements is, English their first language. Is there a reasoning that they're asking for X, Y, and Z? And we're gonna evaluate that. The plan design, obviously, if we're going to be putting in a plan, we want to know what the client wants, what their needs are, and how we're going to go about doing that. So we want to make sure we know what the plan design is. If a group currently has coverage, this is probably one of the most important aspects that you as an advisor are going to need to get and also to understand. There's a reasoning behind this. So if you've worked with us in the past, you know that if you've had a group that currently has coverage, you know that we ask for the last 2 to 3 years of claims experience and the last 2 or 3 years of rate history. We're going to get to that in the following slides of why we need it. Without it, we won't work on the case. But there is important information that we need and the reasoning behind it. So we're going to get to that in a minute, as well as the employee data. Now, we call it employee data. You might know it as employee census, but it's really important. It tells us a lot. It tells us how many employees are on the plan, the ages of the people on the plan. If we're doing a plan design that's based on a certain amount of life insurance based on their income, or we're putting in long-term disability or short-term disability, then the reasoning behind getting occupations and their salaries are important. We want to know their status. Are they single, couple, or family? The rules around filling out employee data, that's going to be important. We're going to get to that. And of course, the last but not least, we want to know your notes. So did you find out something during this meeting that we need to know about? Is there something you want to bring to our attention when we're sending out this quote? Maybe there's a particular insurance company you do not like to work with. I'm going to need to know that in order so I don't send it out to that underwriter. So things like that we're going to need to know. We're going to take it one step at a time here. But when it comes to company information, there's a set of criteria that we are going to need in order to send it out. It's industry-wide. It's not insurance carrier-wide. It's best practices in the industry and information that is going to be really important in whether or not an insurance carrier is going to want to quote on the group. So number 1 is company name, so legal operating name. Some insurance will check. We'll do a high-level company search and background check on the group. If there's questions on, if they're a nonprofit organization or if they're like a seasonal type company, they might do a background check. The location and region. Why is that important? Well, there are certain provinces that have different criteria when you're quoting on a group. So, for instance, if you're quoting on a group in BC, well, there's fair pharmacare out there. So that's going to be important because some of the drugs may be offset if there's a large claim, into their Fair Pharmacare portion of the plan. Dental fee guides are different for every single province. So knowing what they're quoting, that may impact dental rates as we go through. Quebec is a separate situation. They've got RAMQ. So we need to know if there's, Quebec employees, because how their claims are adjudicated are a little bit different. So rates will vary province to province, particularly for health and dental, where fee guides differ and provincial health plans also differ. The industry and occupations. So not just industry, but occupations are also really important. For instance, the example that we used here is a heavy duty blue collar industry where disability risk is high, but your client has a low number of employees in an actual high risk occupation. So take a mining company. Getting long-term disability for a mining company is really hard, but you might only have office staff that are being covered. Well, they're not in the field, therefore they could qualify for long-term disability. So not only having the nature of industry, but the occupations may help get you a certain benefit, depending on what you might be looking for. The number of years in business is hugely important. Companies who have not been incorporated or around for more than a year, insurance companies don't like to insure because they're not sure of the stability of the organization, and that is a risk to them. So shows business stability. Insurers often want a business to be operating for 2 years. I'm going to go with 1 year. And depending on, because it depends on the insurance company, and we can build a business case around that. So that's going to be important. So when we ask you for this information, we're not trying to be difficult. We're trying to make sure that the client is getting the best rates with the best companies and making sure your credibility stays intact as well. And then the number of employees, we're going to need to know that because that will dictate the products that are available to the client. So if you have a 2-person group, we can get coverage for a 2-person group. However, there's only 2 carriers that will allow that to happen currently on the traditional side. One requires medical evidence, the other doesn't. So you're limited. Once you start getting into 3, 4, 5 employees, now the carriers open up because typically they want 3 or more people on a plan. So knowing the number of employees opens the marketplace and opens up the offering that can be provided. There are. I'm looking at the Q&A and the chat, and I see that there aren't any questions. Please don't hesitate if you have something. Happy to jump in and go over any of those questions. But the next stage of our presentation is underwriting. Okay, this is where the crux of questions and clarification is key. And when we're working with an advisor and you're working with a client, if we don't get this stuff nailed down at the beginning, this could produce delays in getting quotes. So we want to make sure when we're talking about our Netflix series that we're covering off all of this information, because this is the difference between success and failure. And when you're working with a client, you want to make sure you're educated and well equipped with some of the questions that might come across your desk as well. So there's 4 types of risk: anti-selection risk, claims risk, workforce risk, and then marketing risk. So let's go over each one. Anti-selection risk. That's the number one. One of those things is how much premium is the employer going to contribute to the plan. So industry standard is the employer is obligated to pay at least 50% of the premium in order to qualify under contract under group contract law to pay 50% of the premium. Whatever premium the employer pays, they could write off as a business expense, but they are obligated to pay at least 50%, because then it becomes anti-selection, because then people are picking and choosing, or employers may be picking and choosing who goes on a benefit plan, and they cannot. Any T Ford employee who works at a company is eligible and must be represented on the employee census. They cannot pick and choose whether or not to come onto the plan. There are rules around it, and employers are obligated to make sure all their T4 employees have access to the benefit plan. They cannot pick and choose. And another risk is the benefits plan a condition of employment. So you might be working with a client who's doing a large amount of hiring, and in order to be competitive and retain and attract new employees, benefits might be a condition of their employment. So you want to make sure that they understand the rules around that. If they need to waive coverage for somebody, and I mean waive the waiting period, not waive coverage for that individual. So that's important. The next one is claims risk. This is the one that gets employers and advisors in a little bit of trouble if we don't get the right information. So, questions that you're going to want to ask when you're doing your prospect meeting. We talked about this last week when we were talking about discovery. Some of what can separate you out in the industry as a better advisor is if you have these questions at your fingertips and get to them quickly. So some questions that you're going to want to ask are any employees away from work for sickness or injury? If they are, we need to know about that. That is a risk to the underwriters that are working on the case. If this group currently has coverage and there's people off on short-term disability or long-term disability, the insurance companies are going to come back to us and say, we want to know when they were off, what's their prognosis, are they planning on coming back to work? That's a liability for them. So we're going to want that information. Are there, I just covered this, but are any long-term disability claims in the last 3 years? They're going to want to know that because there's dollar amounts that are associated with the claims payout. So we're going to want to know that so that they can get an idea of anybody else went on LTD. What would this look like from a risk perspective to them if they took this case on? And of course, any high cost drug claims, how many? Annual amounts paid by the insurer. So if you've got a group of 20, let's say 10, whatever the case may be, and there's people who have cancer or Remicade, well, those are high cost drugs, which means that there may be drugs that are in a pool. We're going to need to know that. And the reason we're going to need to know that is, number one, the employees currently might have had pre-authorized drug capability with the current carrier. If we were to move the plan, will that be grandfathered over, or do they have to go through through that pre-authorization again? That might be a hindrance. There might be too many claims in that high cost drug area that it's too risky for the insurance company, so they don't want to quote on the group because of that. That's going to be information that's really important. And we're going to be able to see that in the information that we get from you, and we may need to come back to you with questions. So that's going to be important as well. The other two are workforce risks. So is there a union, and are benefits specified in a collective bargaining agreement? If you're working with a group who has union workers, you can't just go in there and say, oh, I can get you a better rate, or let me quote on your benefits. There are yearly bargaining agreements that employers have to go through. There has to be an agreement in order to move carriers. It is not easy. And if you don't understand that going in, you could get yourself into some trouble. So we want to know if there's a union. Are there seasonal employees to be covered? Typically, if there are seasonal employees and they are off for more than 4 months, they don't qualify for benefits. There are some insurance carriers that will do in 8 months if they're seasonal, but anything more than that, that's going to be a no-go. So we don't want you to be in a position where you're prospecting a company that's got seasonal workers and some of their workforce is unemployed for 5-6 months of the year. That's not a group that's going to get coverage. Okay. And then marketing risk. How long has the client been with the current carrier? We ask that because if they've only been with the carrier for 1 year, odds are that the insurance companies are going to decline to quote. They want to see at least 2 or 3 years with the same carrier. It also may show that this group, this client markets on an ongoing basis. And if they do, insurance companies don't like that. So we want to make sure that you're covering your bases with those questions. And why are we doing the marketing? Is there a specific reason why? Is it a service issue? Is it that rates are getting under control? Things like that. So I'm just going to pause for 1 second. I see that there is some questions here. So number one, the slide deck will be available. It'll be on Win Big after the meeting, or if you need it, I'm happy to do that. Part-timers. So there's another question here about part-timers. If part-timers are working, there's some insurance companies that'll go down to 15 hours a week to be eligible. Others are more than 24 hours. Then they could be put on the plan. What an employer views as part-time is not necessarily what the insurance company views as part-time. But you as the advisor and the employer can set the number of hours you want to make eligible as long as everybody gets those same hours. So if you wanted to adhere against high turnover, then you may want to put in a 30-hour work week in order to be eligible for benefits. We do that all the time. So that's something, I hope I answered that question. If you need more information after that, again, happy to set up one-on-ones for you. So let's go to the next slide. Administration and funding requirements. So this one's interesting. Underwriters will consider how a plan needs to be set up for administration purposes. So here's a few examples. One of them is, does the demographic warrant couple rates? Okay, so there are carriers that are out there that recognize that that there is a difference between a family and just and a couple, and that some people just may not have kids, or planning on having kids, or that maybe they're in their 50s and they're now considered they don't have they're empty nesters, so they don't have kids. And so when we're going out to market, that is interesting because if we can get couple rates because they are cheaper than a family, then that might bring down the overall cost of the plan. Now, it can get to be a bit of a nightmare if your plan administrator does not know the rules about changing from couple to family status. So if you remember, I think it was last week we talked about, no, it wasn't last week. It may have been in the session before where we talked about the 31-day rule. If you've had a life event within 31 days that you need to inform the insurance company. So let's say somebody was a couple, but then they had a baby, they need to have their coverage changed from couple to family. And so as long as plan administrators know how to do that, then it's fine. But it does become a cost-effective way of adding benefits onto the plan. So that will be important in the administration of the plan. There are also other things from an administration cost to the underwriter as well. Does the group have multiple operating divisions? So are you working with a group currently that might have 6 or 7 locations? They're having one policy, but each group is a separate division. We need to know that ahead of time because that could cost from an administrative point of view to the insurance company. There might be a cost of adjudication on that aspect of it. So that would be important. Plus, you want to make sure that the plan is set up properly. So divisions are important. Does this group like paper? Is there going to be a lot of administration from the employer because they don't want to go onto the online portal, for instance, or do they require extra training and support? So that's going to be important. And then the last piece are any benefits to be self-insured. And so we can get into a separate discussion about that. But, sometimes depending on the size of the group, some companies like to self-insure their benefits and just have them adjudicated by the insurance company. And there's a fee to do that. So that might be something that we need to know, because there's a fee structure and a setup to do that. So those are going to be kind of your funding and administration. That will be important for them. Now, there is another there is a question. So one of the questions here is, should the answers to many of these questions be compiled into a cover letter, or no point in making a cover letter since you'll be working with the group carriers on the agent's behalf? So a lot of this, if you utilize our services and one of our business models, and if you're in the from Ontario to Halifax, for instance, if I was coming to a prospect meeting with you, this would be something that I would be doing in the discovery. It wouldn't be something I'd be writing, but having a verbal conversation about. I tend to bring some of these things up when we're talking in the prospect meeting. If you're doing your own prospect meeting, and we're not included in that, then you might want to use our discovery document to get some pointers to make your job easier. But there is a natural progression. Like I said, again, if we're talking about our Netflix series, there is a progression from when we had our initial conversation, getting the information from the client, and then maybe going back to them once we have the information. Before we present it, we're going to make sure that all of those episodes were kind of checked off before we go back to them in to the meeting with our findings or our marketing proposal. So you don't necessarily have to do a cover letter, but having these questions or these topics at your fingertips will help you. Okay. The next part of it is your plan design. Okay. So there's two types of plan designs. There's the plan design with a group who has a group benefit plan already put in place or with an existing plan. And then there's the plan design you can put in place for a group who's a virgin group, no existing plan. So let's cover that off. When you have an existing plan and you're trying to make them a prospect, there is a vital and necessary information that you're going to want to get to us in order for us to quote on the group. So provide a copy of their current plan booklet by class, or a high-level summary of the benefits if no booklet is available. I prefer the booklet. And if you're working with a group who's got more than one class, we're going to need copies of the booklet for each class. Reason being is we might be making recommendations to change their plan structure, but the plan design that they currently have, the rates and experience that are provided were set or are based off of that plan design. So we can't change a plan unless we know what the current plan is. And we also can't work on it because rates and experience were set based off of that plan design. So if we're going to make changes, we want to know where to make the changes and where some savings might come to. So that's why we ask for it. Does current plan design support client objectives? Well, it might not. Maybe we're increasing the plan. Maybe we're adding critical illness, a group critical illness program. Maybe we're doing, maybe we're going to pull out paramedical practitioners and offset it with a healthcare spending account, so that costs remain low. So we want to make sure, like our Netflix series, that we've gone back to episode 1 from the initial conversation, from the discovery, making sure we're creating the plan based on what we heard, and so that when we do the marketing proposal, that we've checked that box. And if we are working on something with you, and the client is happy with their current plan design, you might want to ask them, or maybe you've engaged us, are you or your client interested in seeing some alternatives recommended by our team? Maybe that's a mental health solution. Maybe maybe it's cheaper to pull out the employee assistance program with Sun Life or Manulife or Canada Life, whoever the client happens to be with, and offset it with an amazing other product that might be cheaper and more effective. that might be something that you and I engage in, or Candy and you engage in, depending on where you are. Now, a group that has no existing coverage, well, that's easy. That's based off of the discovery that you've done or the questions that you've asked your client. Do you need help aligning clients' needs with an appropriate plan design? That's where our team can play a vital role in putting in. It's You'll hear me say this. It's one thing to put in a benefit plan. It's another to put in the right benefit. So maybe you need our assistance with coming up with a strategy with that. Maybe we're doing, maybe it's a simplified plan that we have with Worldsource or with Equitable Life. That's just a no-brainer. Here are your plan options. This is what the client wants, and it's easy to implement. Maybe it's something like that. Or maybe it's just healthcare spending account until the group grows to a level where the needs are different. So we want to make sure that we're asking the right questions, that we're getting the right information in both scenarios, because that's going to increase your credibility. Rates, history, and claims experience. This is, again, and I said this before when we started the webinar, this is probably one of the most important areas and comes into play when a group currently has coverage that you're trying to prospect. There are a lot of advisors, I'm not saying on this call, but I'm saying in the industry, who hold some of this information near and dear to their heart because they don't want to give the client enough information to go out into the marketplace to do a marketing for their group. And so they don't give them all of this information. And they get a hint when employers come and ask them for their history of rates and claims experience. It is the key words that get advisors very nervous about a potential loss of the group or a potential marketing from another advisor. We have a rule in our organization. The client, if they've been with us for more than 1 or 2 years, 3 years, we are very transparent to our advisors. We always give the last 3 years of rates and experience, including pooled claims, because we never want an advisor to be hiding information or not be able to present a renewal that is inaccurate or left with questions. So when you get a report from us, we're always giving you all of the information that we would require if we were working on a case. Rates, history, assist in assessing reasonability of claims experience provided. So we ask for as much as possible. If the group's been around for 2 years or 3 years, we ask for at least 3 years, 2 years if we can get it. And that is it's a form in every renewal report. Every insurance carrier, every broker, every advisor will get a renewal report, and it's in there. It is the premium paid for health versus the claims paid out for health. It is the premium paid for dental versus the claims paid out for dental, and what that target loss ratio if they were above or below. That is key. If we don't have it, we're not going to work on a group who currently has coverage and can't provide it. We also, when it comes to disability claims, we want to know the date the claim started, the expected date of return, and the prognosis. It also provides guidance on exceptional claims. So, for instance, if we were doing a marketing and you came to me and there was a cancer claim, and you said to me, you know what, we're marketing the group because this person who was on the plan last year, unfortunately, he's passed away. Well, that claim is no longer there. Therefore, it's not a risk to the insurance company. So when we send it out to market, we have now built a credible business case for why the insurance company should look at it. They may just exclude that drug altogether because it's not there, right? So this helps us increase our business case that we make, increases your credibility as an advisor. We also require, if possible, to get the claims breakdown by type. So when we talk about healthcare or extended healthcare, 5 areas: hospital claims, major services and supply claims, drug claims, paramedical claims, vision claims, and they can be broken down, and the renewal report will provide that. On the dental side of it, it'll be basic services, major services, orthodontic services if it's there. Under basic, it'll be basic services, endo and perio. Okay, so that is important, and we do like to get a breakdown of that so that we're properly, authentically, and being transparent with how this group runs. The next piece of the puzzle, which is vital, which this is where employers can give pushback, or advisors just don't understand. There is a reasoning why we need all of this information. Names are not necessary. Okay, you can do employee 1, employee 2, you can do initials, you could do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, A, B, C, D, E. Not a problem there. The gender and the age is absolutely guaranteed. We are all in the industry. We all know that life insurance is based on gender and age. We all know that critical illness, disability, anything you're doing in wealth management, everything goes back to how old are you, what's your gender. We all know that. That is vital and part and parcel of the employee census. The occupations are an absolute necessity if life insurance is on the plan and it's based on earnings, or if there's short-term disability or long-term disability. Those are absolute musts, okay? Because the whole rate is based on the occupation and salaries of the group. It's not necessary if it's just a flat amount of life insurance and there's no disability. This is, okay, I'm going to get back to the enrollment status. Earnings are important if we're doing disability or life insurance based on a percentage of your income. The province of residence is important because different provinces have different rates. We want to know where the client resides. The benefit class, if there is one. So if you're classing out or tiering out the benefit plan, we need to know who's in class A, B, C. And of course, the number of hours worked per week in order to ensure that we're covering off the eligibility. So really anything more than 20 hours a week could be eligible for benefits, unless the client has specified they don't want to offer benefits to employees less than, 27 hours a week or 30 hours a week or something like that. So that's going to be important. However, this one is the most important, and this is where advisors and employers get themselves in trouble. Firstly, employers cannot pick and choose who goes on a benefit plan. Employees cannot pick and choose if they want to be part of a benefit plan. The only time an employee, there's 2 times where an employee can waive coverage. One, if their spouse currently has coverage. Okay, so if they're a couple or a family, and they currently have coverage with their spouse or partner, they can waive health and dental, no problem. And they have to be on the plan for life insurance, AD&D, and if there's disability or CI put in place. So they can waive health and dental, they're on for the pooled benefits, and the only time that they can waive that is if they have coverage with a spouse. The other time that they can waive it is if they refuse benefits altogether. And the only time you can waive them if you don't want to participate in the benefit plan, but you're going to sign off a refusal of benefits form, and you will not be able to come onto the plan again under any circumstances unless you go through full medical underwriting. If employees start picking and choosing who can go on a benefit plan or not put people on a benefit plan properly, there is a huge legal liability to that organization. If somebody wasn't on the benefit plan, and let's say that person died and their spouse came in and found out that there was a benefit plan and they ask you, well, they ask the employer, well, if you had a benefit plan, I want to make a claim for life insurance. And if the employer says, well, he wasn't on the benefit plan, well, show me where he waived coverage. Show me that you even offered coverage to him. Show me the refusal of benefits forms. If they can't produce it, the employer is on the hook for that life claim. They will be sued. If an employee didn't go on the plan when they were supposed to, and they forgot, or they didn't want it, or they refused it at the time, and all of a sudden they got diagnosed with cancer, that is a huge liability. They will not be able to get on the plan unless they went through full medical underwriting, and they'd probably be declined. So as a rule of best practices, the only time an employee can waive coverage is if they have coverage with a spouse, or they sign a refusal of benefits form. But if they sign that refusal of benefits form, they are not going on the benefit plan again. They'll have to go through evidence of insurability. We never want an employer to be at risk for not putting the plan in place. More importantly, we do not want you, the advisor, to have put yourself in a position where you did not advise the employer of how to fill out the employee data, or how to put in a proper benefit program, and put yourself at risk. So this is an absolute must. We're going to spend more time on it as time goes on with best practices in the industry, but that is vital. If you need help with that, our team is here to help and support. I have often played the role of the bad guy to support the advisor, to give credibility to the advisor, and been the bad guy in telling an employer, if you're not going to put this benefit plan in place, we're not working on properly. And with the advice to protect all of the stakeholders, I'm not working on this case. You either put it in properly or find yourself another advisor. I will not put you, the advisors, at risk of your credibility. We're not going to put IDC's risk in line or at risk for our credibility. And we do not want the insurance company to be putting in a benefit plan that isn't set up properly. So I know that seems harsh, but if I don't say it, you could get yourself into trouble, and that's the last thing that we want to do. The last piece here is advisor notes. So remember, you want to get the right rates, not just the low rates. And we're going to talk about that next week when we're talking about the marketing proposal and how to read a marketing proposal. Low rates may just set your client up for problematic renewal, but there also might be something in the plan design that is really important to the client, and they might want to pay more for that. So we're going to go through that next week. So couple of checkpoints here. Take the opportunity to provide any information about the client that would be helpful to the underwriter. If the client has pain points with their existing plan, we want to know about it because we have ways to solve for it. If you have completed a group KYC with your client, please provide a summary of it because we want to make sure we're checking off the boxes. If you want us to be part of that discovery, happy to do so. And then you want to make sure that you're asking your client, is your client interested in cost stabilization? Because we have products, or we can ask for rate caps if we need to. Are they interested in flex plans or hybrid plans? Something that we can work with you on. And then, of course, the ancillary, or what we call whole health benefits. As many of you know, we have a tagline here, which is humanizing benefits. If you've been part of our symposiums or other webinars that I've hosted, you'll know I'm very big on the humanizing element, humanizing benefits, and whole health benefits. And those take into effect of EAP, so employee assistance programs, telemedicine, HR support, health and wellness programs. So we can put all of that in together if we need to. That is the presentation in a nutshell. I think we've got 9 minutes left. Yes, so the question about, is this going to be available on WinBig? Yes, it is. You don't have to worry about that at all. These are also, by the way, CE accredited. So if this is the first time you're taking the session this year, because I did a 4-part series in the spring, But if you didn't attend that and you're attending this one, there are CE credits for it. But if you already attended the one in the spring or the winter last year or earlier, then you're not going to get another 4 CE credits. It's only because it's the same presentation. This is group benefits. So when we're putting in a group benefit plan, we are also adding in life insurance, AD&D, and disability from time to time, depending on what we're looking at. It's not just life insurance. We are working in the group benefit space. And 9 out of 10 benefit plans require you to have some form of life insurance and accidental death and dismemberment. I want to take the opportunity to thank you so much for joining me today. The next week's session is understanding the marketing proposal. So we've gone through the due diligence, we've done the needs analysis, we've sent it out to market, we've populated for you, and now you're ready to go and present it. So how do you do that? Well, how are you going to navigate that? And that's what next week is all about. So we hope that you'll be able to join us. Looking so forward to that. So if you need anything, you can reach out to me personally, and I'm happy to facilitate, or depending on the province, Candy can step into that as well. So with that, I'm going to let you get back to your day. Thank you for spending an hour with me, and I'm looking forward to next Monday.